Ismael, I'm very delighted to be having this conversation with you, long awaited after our various conversations. How are you this morning?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. Very excited about today.
Oh, well, you are one of the most thoughtful people I've come across when it comes to considering AI and all its complexities and nuances. And so, yes, I've been very much looking forward to kicking off with this conversation. And to start by asking you, especially given your background, which is fascinating, how you began your work in AI and ethics in particular.
Yes, well, thank you. I always struggle with the question, even though everyone asks it. My career's been a roller coaster. I started in fintech at Bloomberg, strictly speaking, straight out of university. I learned that corporate America isn't my style.
Yeah.
I moved into human resources at different arts organizations, Art Fund and the Royal Opera House in London. And then I moved into human resources at the Alan Turing Institute. So the Alan Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for AI and Data Science. And whilst I was there, they were looking to begin a research ethics committee. So that's the sort of department that you'd find at universities that handles the ethics of medical research.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it would be to handle the ethics of all of the AI and data science research being done at the Alan Turing Institute. Now, I was very lucky to get that role, and it made sense. At least the pitch I was giving, and which was successful somehow, was that right, this is about organizing a group of people. Fine, that's HR-ish,
Yeah.
but it's also about getting what might seem like quite a bureaucratic process, and it can be a pain. Research ethics committee process can be a pain. I acknowledge that. I'm sorry to all researchers out there who've gone through my process. But the role is very similar to in HR, where you need to explain why do we need to do this? Why do we need to have an open opportunities sort of model for recruitment? Why do we need to make sure we follow the robust processes for recruitment, investigations, and so on? So that was the pitch I gave and the one that was successful. And what the succeeding year and a half, 2 years looked like was establishing a framework that worked with the Alan Turing Institute's values. So back then there was a paper that was on the FAST principles. I don't think I can remember them, but the FAST principle, it was a while ago, the FAST principles for responsible AI and and open science practices. So the Research Ethics Committee then had a consistent framework through which to evaluate all of the work that was being done at the Alan Turing Institute. From what I'm aware, it's still going on, so fingers crossed. My work is still there. That's my legacy. Since then, so I left them at the end of 2021. I finished a master's degree in philosophy of the social sciences, and then I said, well, you know what? Having a normal job is too easy. I'm going to go it alone because why not?
Why not?
Why not? So I started my own consultancy, and I've since leaving the Turing, I've worked with somehow NASA. That's always the funniest to mention.
That's amazing.
Gene Golding Institute, International World Building Institute. We and AI are very important. I'm sure I'll mention them again. And it's for me, that introduction to AI and AI ethics at the Alan Turing Institute was early 2020, and that to me was important enough to say, right, we're on something quite big here. This is a big topic. And 5 years later, it feels like we're still in a similar place where this has many years to go. We have a lot of conversations about AI ethics to have. So I'm just riding the wave, seeing where it ends up. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? I was talking this morning with a doctor who's working in healthcare tech, And he was saying that when he first started decades ago, their oath that is sworn is first do no harm, and how actually we need that within the vast and multifaceted world of artificial intelligence development and technology in general, I would suggest. And obviously, perhaps that's possible more in the space of AI for healthcare, because it has to, one would hope, fall under that precept of first do no harm. And yet it's not something which people talk about amidst all of the hype. It doesn't take up much airtime, publicly speaking. But before we get into that, because I definitely want to get into that, let's first talk about what you conceive of as AI, because different people have different versions of this answer, and so I'm really intrigued how you answer that. Just to ground ourselves there to begin with.
And I love that you asked that question, because so many conversations about AI just assume we know what we mean by AI. So I ask, starting from what on earth are you on about when you say AI is just really valuable. There's one aspect of that question which I think is important. So what is AI? The bit I've always held on to is a distinction that was drawn by the European Commission, I think back in 2021, between AI as technologies and AI as research or science. So it refers both to a whole range of tools, the ones we all know, the ChatGPTs and the Claudes and so on, the Copilots on GitHub and everything. But it also refers, and honestly, these are the important ones, it refers to the AI tools in healthcare. Like you just mentioned, it refers to AI in other domains. So AlphaFold is a very well-known tool developed by Google DeepMind a few years ago, which is able to predict the shape of proteins. This is very important for pharmacogenomics and so on. So those are the AI tools. AI refers to these tools, these technologies, and AI refers to the research that allows these tools to be done. So back to my days at the Alan Turing Institute, conversations at Jim Golden Institute, conversations these days at San Diego Supercomputer Center. The research they're doing is AI. They are doing AI research. So AI is always, this might be interesting for this podcast specifically. I use AI as I'm not going to remember the word, but as an adjective, basically. For me, it's like chocolate in chocolate milk. And when we use AI, it's an AI tool, it's an AI project, it's an AI system, right? So that to me is the definition of AI. It needs to be, it's the modifier of something that follows.
Yes.
So those tools, those systems, those practices that follow AI for me are always going to rely these days on huge amounts of data and some kind of machine learning practice. So yeah, for the sake of, I think, a conversation with me, generally, I'm saying, right, AI is a series of tools or practices that rely on huge amounts of data that are analyzed or fed through some machine learning practice technique that lends itself to some output.
Yeah.
What that output is up to the team creating, doing the AI, whatever that means.
Great. That's so helpful. And I love that you distinguish kind of the tools and the practice. I think that gives us a really great starting point. And so one of the things that I found compelling when we first were introduced is the ways in which you describe artificial intelligence, because it's so easy. Like if I look at my LinkedIn feed, it's so easy to talk about AI in abstraction, or nowadays there's like all these models, they talk about LLMs and then LCMs, and then there's this and then there's that. And it's I think one of the key challenges is getting people to sort of find a way to lean into these conversations when they might otherwise be quite overwhelmed. So I do a lot of speaking at conferences where I'm talking more about the human aspect of it. I'm not so heavy on the technology side. Obviously, I understand the precepts and stuff, but also about what does it mean to be human in an age of AI? How do we get people to not fear engaging in conversations that will meaningfully impact their futures? What are the risks? How can we get people to better understand where we're at, basically? And one of the things that I love about how you start to engage people is through the imagination, is through stories, communicating mythologies, fictions, and working with organizations, which are made up of people, of course, who are not necessarily technologists, who are perhaps unfamiliar, and finding these entry points which are rich and engaging and inviting people into conversation. So can you tell us why this approach, I mean, obviously I find it very valuable, I'm beaming, but why do you find this approach so useful when we're talking about technology?
So there's a couple of things there. The first thing is, and I find this in my personal life where I'm surrounded by people who thankfully couldn't care less about AI.
There's a lot to unpack there.
It's a good thing. It's such a good thing. I can leave the home office and step outside, and the cats definitely don't care.
Yeah.
But for me, it's really important in conversations that are more or less demanding, I guess, or technical, that I always challenge people's fear about AI. Anecdotally, I once had my dentist asked recently, first time I had this dentist, and they asked, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm not sure really. I work in AI. Oh, wow. What that stuff is really scary. They kind of like, that stuff is really scary. It's on the news. We hear about it all the time. It's quite scary. And I I wasn't going to lecture them, but in like a 20-second intervention, I felt like, okay, it's my role to make sure we know that this is not scary. You do amazing work. You're a dentist. You're an expert. You know how your tools work.
Yeah.
Keep doing that. The stories about fear are just that. They are stories. So when I'm actually engaged in a deeper conversation, that obviously isn't a 20-second intervention, but I draw on stories that we have from ancient mythology to modern films, right? Terminator is a clear example where which we all know Terminator because it's a part of culture. It's something that's accessible to the masses. So we all can turn to Terminator and say, is that what AI is going to look like? And my role is to say, definitely not. Like that's a fictional robot that literally traveled through time. Like, don't worry about it. It's okay. But those are the stories we draw on. And what I found fascinating is that we've been drawing on these stories for centuries. And there is one story that I like bringing up because it is a footnote on the Wikipedia page about AI, I think. But it is a really fun story. It's from the 4th century BCE, in the Book of Master Li, and it's a Taoist text. So it's teaching us the Tao, and there's a passage about King Mu of Shu. I don't know how it's pronounced. Chou. Mu of Shu. He's traveling homebound back into China. He's on the west territories of China, or just outside the border, traveling back, and someone is brought to him, Yan Shi. And Yan Shi has invented something. He's really excited. He wants to show the king. So they agree, fine, we'll see it together and bring it tomorrow. He brings it. He comes in the next day, and the first thing the king asks is, who is that next to you? This is the thing I created. Do you like
Oh,
it?
wow.
It is something of my handiwork. It sings and dances and performs, and the king is like amazed. And there's a moment the king actually, I think, touches it, or Yen Shi touches it so that it activates. It starts dancing, it performs, it's magical. The king's harem are like, oh, whoa, that's so cool. Fine, it's ancient China, it's different times.
Yeah.
They're all enjoying this performance, and and that, to me, is somehow what we're seeing these days. We're all enjoying this performance. In the last release of one of OpenAI's tools, Sam Altman definitely speaks of magic.
Mm.
I think it's deep research or deep search that he describes as, this is shocking, this is really magical.
Mm.
We're using the same language as 2,500 years ago. But there's another element to this story which I really love, which is that, okay, well, there's a really tricky bit where the machine winks at one of the king's concubines.
Uh-oh.
Oh no! Oh dear! Oh no! Yen Shi, like, luckily is instinctive and really smart and says, "Okay, I need to stop this," and he pulls the machine apart. And then the king is like, "Oh, cool! And he's like looking at the lungs, and it's made out of lungs and muscle and bone, and he starts to see, he tests it, they rebuild it, and they see that when the heart isn't in, it doesn't work, so it needs to all be built all together. And he starts to understand, okay, this isn't a threat to my, I guess, whatever his relationship to his harem is. I don't
To my
I don't
dominance.
his dominance. um, um, but I really love that bit, because it sort of, it's what I believe in. If we understand how these things work,
Yeah.
they're a lot less impressive. They're impressive, but they're not magical and fascinating and awe-inspiring to the extent that we need to use all of the AI tools ever.
Yeah.
So that, to me, is a really important conversation that I bring to organizations. What level of understanding do you need that will help you overcome this either fear or the opposite, absolute hype and fascination with these things?
Yeah, it's quite tricky. Like there's a number of people that I meet who are just so excited by the idea, and it is exciting, but to the point where the critical thinking just evaporates. And I'm like, how? I I don't know. I find it really shocking, and it's one of these things where I would hope that, especially if you go through having been through the cycle with the dot-com boom and then social media and the promise of everything that it could unleash, and then the risks that we're now starting to see manifest more clearly, that so close to those issues that we should
Yeah,
then lose that sense of critical thinking and discernment. Is, or do you read it? How do you read it?
that so that's really interesting, and that kind of challenges me, and I need to think a bit about that, or we need to figure it out in the next half an hour of this podcast. um, I've seen someone ask me recently, what do you think the future generations or the younger generations, how will they handle AI?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not one for too much speculation, but my gut reaction was, well, surely if they're brought up with it, they'll be able to deal with it a lot better than the current workforce, which is all googly-eyed over it. But what you just said is, wait, the current workforce, some of us more, some less,
Yeah.
saw the dot-com era, saw the impact of the internet, social media, and so on. Why are we still so fascinated by AI?
Yeah. And there's
I
this
don't know how to
enchantment.
deal with that. Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if it's to do in part because, so I mean, technology is very exciting. There is so much that we can do, and especially when you connect it to the possibility of creating with less friction, let's say. So someone who's an artist and musician, there is something very seductive and enchanting about. I used to think this when I was growing up. I would have dreams occasionally when I was playing more classical violin when I was much younger. I would have dreams of symphonies, and I remember waking up. And this would happen quite often because you'd have to train on Baroque violin, so it was like Vivaldi and Bach and things like this. And so I was spending a lot of time playing that music, thinking about it, learning that music, and my mind at night would then create music that was similar. And I remember saying to my parents, I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if I could just plug something into my mind, and instead of having to transpose, because I was terrible at the theory and like slow, and I'm quite impatient in that sense, it could just broadcast what was in my mind, put it into sheet music, so that then I could play it, because when I wake up, it disappears within half an hour or less time, perhaps sometimes. And now, of course, we're seeing people like the CEO of Suno saying, well, musicians don't want to have to create or go through the process of. And actually, as I've gotten older, there is something extraordinary about craftsmanship and patience and resilience. And it's crucially, now we're starting to see with a lot more papers coming out, to your point about earlier about research, that the wise use of AI comes in our approach to it as something that we can use in particular ways to support and augment our capacities, not to undermine, replace, or weaken them. And so there's this thing of like, to know when and how to use it, and to be able to assess it if we're using it as a tool within a wider practice. So issues around things like cognitive decline, or our ability to think through and reason through things, or to deal with a certain level of friction and discomfort, or mental effort. Like, there's so many areas in which it's very easy to say, oh, I'm just going to shortcut this pain and outsource this, and then realize perhaps too late, well, actually, maybe it would have been helpful to put in the hours, use this, but not all the time. So that it's kind of like, I don't know, you're walking with 2 feet, not just with one, where that foot becomes AI and then everything atrophies. Well, it's a bit excessive to say, but just to kind of point towards it.
To me, and this, I feel like this is a conversation that we've been having for at least 5 years. And I say that because I wasn't having the conversation 6 years ago, basically. But the potential for AI tools to, quote unquote, create images, and I say quote unquote because I think creation has too much to do with creativity, which is too human to say that the AI generate. So, okay, two things. There's the linguistic aspect to this. How do we describe what AI does? I think using words like it passes huge amounts of data. Passing, robots pass. People
totally.
don't pass, right?
Yeah.
Generating, it generates outputs. Outputs is another one. Generation, I think we don't generally generate. I didn't generate an essay when I was at school. I wrote it. It was hard.
Yeah.
We use certain terms that are very human. People are creative. We're imaginative. We're social. We don't need to use those words, and it is hard. But for me, a really important thing is describing what AI tools do accurately is important.
Well, hallucination is a clear one. I'm like, it's not chomp down a bunch of shrooms. It's not hallucinating its tits off. It's fabricating. That's it. Like, do you know?
Yeah.
That's one of my pet peeves.
Yep.
It really.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry. Back to you.
No, but that's exactly right. This stuff is hallucinating.
It implies so much. Yeah.
It implies so much. I haven't had things to hallucinate. I have hallucinations when I have the flu, when I get into like very deep
Yes,
sort
yes.
of, oh no, I'm properly
Altered
out of it.
states.
Yeah. And for me, hallucinating is like it's not a good experience when you wake up and then whoever's taking care of you, your mum, is like, you shouted at me last night. And I'm like, I don't know what happened. Like, I was not. And she's like, no, I know you weren't. Because she knows how I've been doing this since I was little. But like, hallucination is such a human thing.
Yeah.
It's a living being thing. But back to the actual question, which I've completely forgotten.
About creativity. You're talking about the language with which
Yes.
we describe these things.
Yeah. So beyond the language, there's this fascination with these tools to automate everything.
Yeah.
And I really believe they've completely missed the mark when they said, we can automate art. Like, that's like one of the very few things we have left. We, like, come on, we're working 9 to 5 every day from the age of 18 to 65, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And now you want to take away our art. Why don't you just automate the Olympics while we're at it and automate music?
But that's a really good point about the Olympics and the music, and also art being something which is a product. It's such, and that I think the way that we think about art is like, I don't engage in art back to your point about generating an essay when you're studying. You're doing it for a deeper purpose, to learn, to think, to grow, to deepen, to enrich, to challenge. And I think the same thing with art. It's for different people, it's different things. It can be catharsis, it can be wanting to experience that state of flow, or it can be a deep compulsion that doesn't need explaining, but it's not for product.
Yeah.
And then by putting it in that frame, it's anyway. Sorry.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about that.
No. And we're on the same page. We've reduced art to. I just need to go to basically Google Images and find a quick image that I can put on my podcast, my blog, my news article, right? That's what art has been reduced to. It's a product, and hopefully it's free. And if there is intellectual property on it, hopefully the owner doesn't notice, because the internet's chaotic anyway. And things can't be traced back to where they were. Right, I can right-click, save, and use it wherever I want. There's no trace of that. So AI is responding to, or the people using AI and developing AI are responding to this desire to productize everything. And that somehow has come to include the arts. Now, I also, we've discussed this, I also think the use of AI to write papers, to write books, to write reports, to write probably tweets. People have used it to write tweets.
Yeah. A LinkedIn posts.
A LinkedIn post, right? That to me is indicative of, and it's hard to be in this mindset. I love writing. I wish I did more of it. I love writing. You saw how much I wrote to get on to prepare for today. For me, writing is a process of thinking, right?
Yeah.
When I write, I am pushed to articulate something that's more or less intuitive, and I'm prompted to actually find the research that either challenges what I'm intuitively thinking or that supports what I'm intuitively thinking. For me, writing is just such an important thing, and yet you read all these, I'm going to say McKinsey, KPMG, BCG type reports, and you think, did the people who write that actually want to write that, or would they have been happy with ChatGPT doing it, or one of those? I'm this bit I definitely am not sure about, but it feels like there's a sorry, I'm sure there's some Marxist thought that can help with this, but there's an alienation between us and the work we produce, right? We thinking this way, we want to do art in this way, and so on and so forth, but we also need to write these reports for our businesses that we don't care about. And that separation to me is just, it's reinforced by these AI tools. I think it's harder for the artist to be separate from their work. The artist ideally is not using AI to write a book or to create an image. But I think in the workplace, I do see, if you don't like what you're doing, you're going to do it the quickest way. And if ChatGPT or whatever is doing it well enough, then so be it.
It is such a tricky one. There's so much to say about that. There's so much. I was reading this morning, just it was a few headlines, and I've saved the article for later. It was Jonathan Haidt had put on LinkedIn, and it read like him. So I'm assuming it's him and not an AI. Anyway, he'd written on LinkedIn about the decline of reading and writing and literacy since 2010 or thereabouts. And he shows this graph, and it's from this piece in the FT. And I was reading yesterday about something similar, a different article saying something, echoing his sentiments, and how when you're looking at statistics for decreasing literacy and what you were saying about this is really, I don't remember if you've doing this at school, if you are around young children who you have to train to sit and think through how to physically move a scribing implement across a page to create abstract marks that then are related to sounds that we make that relate to language that is an abstracted form of communicating about our lived experience of the real world. That is challenging, right? That's when you actually break it down.
I've not heard about that. I want a whole podcast episode on that. What is that?
Well, no, but writing, like when you teach a kid to think, because we do all this stuff without thinking, and that's what you're doing. It's like, I saw this amazing meme on the grams the other day. It was basically like, how wild is it that you can read a book, and it's basically a dead tree with marks that cause you to basically hallucinate a story.
Yeah.
And when it's written, we're so accustomed to these things, if we're lucky to be in a place where we have access to book and literacy, that it just becomes second nature, right?
Yeah.
And yet when you break it down, you're like, this is actually wild.
Really hard.
It's really hard. And so it's a hard-won skill that's very costly, and yet it's one of the most extraordinary capacities upon which our civilizations have been able to grow and to thrive. Obviously, now we're in a very awkward place, but there is something to it. And so when we think about outsourcing all of that, and to your point about this alienation between what we create and in service to whom and to what, and where the incentives then misalign, if we've created, and then it comes back to the systemic thing, like if we've created stuff that we need to do in order to earn money, to put a house, to put a roof over our head, and to earn enough to feed ourselves and the rest of it, which I get, like we're all in kind of, I think, that sort of system, then sort of the weird artifacts of that system now, as I see it, especially on LinkedIn, and I'm so sorry to, like, there are some great things that are shared on LinkedIn, but there is so much bollocks and noise.
Yep.
And then I'm like, okay, I just have to sift through. So now so much more of my time is spent sifting through rubbish to get to the few gems which still exist. I don't want to waste the years of my life sifting through other people's AI generated noise. Like, that seems like a terrible waste of a life.
Yeah.
And yet that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm coming down quite hard on this.
But
we could use it so much more creatively. Like, let's not waste AI on that. Like
this. So at the Responsible AI Network. So this is out of the RSA. I founded it and co-lead the Responsible AI Network. One of the things we speak about, we have a theory of change. It's online. It's not worth sharing because we're revisiting it, and we need to communicate it in a more fun way.
But it's very interesting, and it's definitely worth sharing.
But fine, we'll share it.
Sorry.
What? No. One of the things we argue for is the need for AI tools to respond for two reasons, to respond to real human needs. The first reason is, at the moment, AI is driven by profit making, right? Not that OpenAI is making that much money. Apparently, they're losing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
they're raising a lot of funds, they're getting a lot of interest, and if they play their cards right, in the long run, they'll do okay. There's a lot of money, so it's all about profit making to some degree. And it's also a question of the energy that we're using to create these tools. So for me, AI has been shown to require vast amounts of energy, usually for AI models to be trained. That's the big bit of effort, the big amount of the larger amount of energy that goes into an AI tool is at the point of development. That to me is the best reason to stop making BS AI tools and to actually do AI that is good for generally healthcare and maybe climate change. But I think there's a weird tension, obviously, between climate change and AI to study and improve climate change. It's like, what are you doing exactly? But AI for healthcare, for me, makes perfect sense. And if we go to the AI life cycle, where we generally start from AI design, and this is like any other product, you start with design. If we had more voices at the design phase, if we had the artists, if we had civil society, if we had different charities and governments, of course, and whoever, but if we had different voices at the point of design, we could create AI tools that are a lot more valuable and where we can justify, if it's the case, the huge energy drain. I think that's another part of the conversation. It's we're creating large language models every other day for the silliest reasons. I don't know. This one does your calendar, this one books your flights, and this one sends your voice directly to Jeff Bezos's bedroom. I imagine he listens. He will be listening to everyone. 28th of March. Since then, your voice has been going through the echo. Anyway, we can link to that if we need to. I'm not making it up. To focus our efforts on AI tools that are socially beneficial in such a way that responds to real needs and minimizes the environmental impact, to me, is crucial. And if we go back to what organizations can gain from AI ethics, it's this conversation of, okay, you're made for profit. How do we make sure, first of all, that planet Earth is still existent in the next so many years, that humanity is still thriving and able to buy your products, but also how are we going to create products that people want, rather than BS products that will just be parts of trends, ebbs and flows, and fads that go up and down. That was a tangent.
No, I think actually that goes right to the very heart of all of these conversations, which is, if we don't have a living, thriving civilization, which depends on the living and thriving of the earth and all of its ecologies, like, nothing else matters. Like, there is no plan B. and Mars. Like well, I'm not going to get crap. It's like we have a planet that for eons has managed a relative kind of equilibrium, and so why would we go and try and terraform a dead planet? It's insane. Anyway, so where do we go from here? Because I feel like there's so much more territory than we even prepared for. I'm really enjoying this, but I'd like to sort of ask, where do you want to go next? Because there's all of these different questions that we'd previously discussed. Where are you drawn to discuss further, or do you want me to give you some options about next questions?
I don't know. I think we can go in lots of directions. I'll take your steer. It's I don't know if there's something that's on your mind right now.
All right. So I want to talk about one of the things that you made a lot more salient to me, which is around many of the challenges that we don't necessarily see because they're not sexy, but they have significant implications. So thinking about data quality, I'd love to talk a bit about that because a lot of people will look at, Perplexity search and Google's dead and then your healthcare, wow. And it's like, okay, well, what about interoperability? What about, as you mentioned, the energy costs? So let's talk first about data quality.
Yeah.
And why that's so important, because it's not sexy, but it really matters.
It really matters.
Yeah.
The joy, yes, that absolutely not sexy, but somehow has been a part of my life for the past. So my career definitely in AI ethics started at the juncture of open science practices and responsible AI, with my own background in, I'd say, corporate ethics. The question of data quality is pretty central. So data, I see it as one of three building blocks of AI proper. So I say the building blocks are the theory, so the science from statistics, mathematics, information science, and so on. There's the compute power, which we just touched on, the amount of energy that's required to create these tools. And now in the UK, for example, we have data centers as critical national infrastructure. So data centers are on par with like water.
Wow.
I find that very funny to say.
Yeah.
And then the third pillar, which is ideally the most obvious one, it's data. It's data. So data, we've had plenty of it over the millennia. We've had libraries. There were ancient libraries in like ancient Babylonia, which is like, wow, cool.
Yeah.
And then Alexandria would be the famous one. And we've always had libraries. And then we had the internet. And it was 1971. There was this great project. It's still online. If you don't know about it, go look it up. It's the Gutenberg project. So Gutenberg, after the guy who reinvented the printer, because the printer's been around for a while. Anyway, 1971, Gutenberg project looked to scan books that were in the public domain, so good old Shakespeare stuff would be the obvious one, and put them online for anyone to access and view. That kicked off what is generally called the open science movement, or is one of the things that kicked it off. So the open science movement calls for more accessible information, more readily available information and scientific knowledge, so that it's more widespread rather than how it was in the Enlightenment era, when things were done with basically letters, Newton sending letters to his buddies and getting feedback, to what if science was done in the open. And then we had in 2001, there was another big step forward for open science, which was the Budapest Open Access Initiative, where a bunch of researchers got together and tried to and argued for the need for scientific articles to basically not be massively paywalled. If anyone listening hasn't looked for scientific articles, you can easily pay for like $100 for a 20-page paper. And that's
a lot of that is publicly funded as well.
And that's publicly funded, and it goes to Elsevier and a few others. So Budapest Open Access Initiative start saying, right, we Project Gutenberg project, great, opening up books. What about opening up scientific research? And then 2016 was another very important moment for open science, when researchers put together the FAIR principles. So these are, you've mentioned some, findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And here we're going down from the research article to the data that is in the research article. How do we make the data accessible in a way that it can inspire further research, but it can also be scrutinized so that the research can be replicated? So this to me is something that's only now being explored, and I say I don't like speculation. I do think it is going to be the thing we'll be doing around AI for the coming years. But putting those FAIR principles, or a version of them, into practice so that the data that feed into AI tools are of high quality. That is, I don't know, if I said I'm going to create a tool, sorry, I'm looking at my phone, so I'm going to say an AI tool that identifies the brand of a phone, for example. So I'm going to create a gathered data for a machine learning model. I'm going to label that data, and that data is going to be high quality if, and then you need to come up with the conditions for high quality data. So shape of the phone, where's the camera placed, what's the logo on the phone, what's the color of the phone, what's the what's maybe the date it was built or launched. You'd put enough metadata, enough data about the data, enveloping this data point so that it is high quality, so that it can be easily parsed, great word, by the machine learning model, right? So the machine learning model is going to be more efficient. And I think this is slightly speculative. I've had the conversation with a few scientists in the field, so I'm confident that it's accurate. But the goal is for those machine learning models to be more efficient, to require less amounts of data, and to require less amounts of energy to produce the same quality outputs. Now we've seen a bit of this with DeepSeek, which came out of China. It's another chatbot, but they did roughly as well as ChatGPT and the good-ish chatbots out there already, with a lot less time and machinery, with a lot less hardware, with a lot less NVIDIA chips or whatever they were using, right? GPUs. So they demonstrated that with enough smarts, you can do a lot more with
a lot less.
That's sad to say that out loud and think that's not just corporate BS. Do more with less, kids. It can be done. We can create good things with less inputs, with less resources. So data quality is something that can accelerate the process of creating good AI tools with less resources. But we need to figure out data quality, and that is a challenge.
Yes. So another challenge, since we're in the world of challenges, is this kind of deploy now, think later approach, which I see a lot of people championing. And actually, to my surprise and delight, many people I've spoken to who are at C-level within organizations actually have a more sober approach to these sorts of technologies. So it might be that certain AI platforms, particularly, for example, within business context, it might be Copilot, are used for specific tasks. They're pretty well road tested. Companies I know who have done a really good job of upskilling or training their employees to use these tools well. They'll often get people to do sprints. So they actually give a context in which there's kind of like a play space. It's like, okay, well, we're going to try listing the top 20 issues that we have. Let's use these different tools, see if we can resolve them to a level of accuracy, reliability, and then suggested follow-on steps that's better than a human, or at least as good as. And if it is, then we'll adopt it. So I've seen some examples where organizations, leaders within organizations, have been quite sober in how they use, test, and deploy AI. And yet, for a lot of folks, there's still this sort of sense of, if I don't do it now, I'm going to fall behind. And because there's so much stuff, every article that you read, sort of, every article, I'm generalizing, but there's so much conversation and news headlines, as you mentioned, and podcasts around it, that it can feel like it's moving so fast that there's no point even attempting to understand. What would you say to that in terms of how we relate to AI if we haven't yet?
I'll work backwards if I remember what the next bit is. But there's a really fun term that you use towards the end, which is, it's not to say that it's what you believe, but AI is moving so fast that X usually is, we can't regulate it. The ones leading it need to do it, and I don't know where to start, so I'm just gonna not do anything, or I really need to be a part of this, so I just need to be a part of it, right? That'll be the second part about like, FOMO as a business strategy. Not good.
Yeah.
If you or anyone listening to this wants to write a book about why AI is not moving as fast as people say, message me. I really want to work on this.
Actually, there's a book coming out called The Con.ai, or it's called The AI Con. But if you go to the Con.ai, it's have you heard about this book coming out?
No, I haven't. No,
I think it's coming out in March. Yeah. There's some books, and there's another one which is AI Snake Oil, which is also quite.
Yes. There are a few coming out, but for me, the question of the speed at which it's moving, I find that question fascinating because I don't think it's moving that fast.
Oh,
I'm reminded when people say, "Oh, ChatGPT 3.5, then 4, now 4.5." I'm reminded of the days when I used to play on my PlayStation on my Dreamcast, and then I went to PlayStation and PlayStation 2, and then I think I moved to Xbox 360 after that.
Yeah.
But this is moving so fast. I feel the exact same thing. Minigame.com, I don't know what on earth is on there these days. I haven't seen it for decades. But the games on Minigame were like so much more advanced within just a few months. The games were so much more interactive and so much more realistic or fun. For me, that was moving fast. Video games are moving so fast. So I have two things. Either this stuff isn't moving as fast as we think, or this stuff is moving as fast as many other things. I don't think the speed, the pace at which AI is moving, whatever that means, because we don't know. AI is generally already a fraught term. Now we're saying it's moving fast. It's like doubly fraught.
Relative
like,
to what?
Thank you. Okay. When my car moves fast, it moves fast relative to the floor, to the ground. I can measure that. I don't know what AI is moving fast. Relative to what AI is moving fast. But for me, this is a fascinating topic. Anyway, that was working backwards. So that point about FOMO, the fear of missing out on AI, That's all it is. It's a misunderstanding of what AI is, added with the layer of it's a misunderstanding of what the speed of AI advancement is, such that we need to be a part of this because it's going somewhere and no one's stopping this train because that's what Sam Altman tells us, or that's what, right? That I'm fascinated by FOMO as a strategy as well. We've seen it we're definitely seeing it currently in the UK, with AI being used across the public sector. The new AI tool is going to be called Humphrey, named right. Okay, so I didn't get that. I didn't get the reference. I'll admit. That's Humphrey Appleby from Yes Minutes. Yes,
probably. Yes, Minister. Is it
Yes, Minister? Yeah. So in Yes Minister, you have this super political bureaucrat, player of the system, Humphrey Appleby, and now we'll have an AI tool across the public sector called Humphrey. I will just acknowledge it's Tanya Duarte from WeAnAI who brought this whole thing to my attention, and I do think that the UK has been for a few years. It's not the current administration alone. Has been subject to FOMO, or has seen FOMO as a strategy for government when it comes to AI. Somehow we beat America on giving Elon Musk a platform. Do you remember that?
At what point?
When Rishi Sunak interviewed him at the AI Safety Summit, right? We've been there. We've been doing this for years. Sorry, I don't know
particularly if you proud of British government for many reasons. That's one of them. But could do better on a report card.
for organizations, there need to be, and it is definitely positive. I hear what you're saying, and I have those conversations where the C-suite or trustees are a bit more. It's not even cautious. It's just level-headed.
Sober. Level-headed.
About the tools that are to be used within the organization.
Yeah.
The challenge is that we've always had I think you call it shadow IT. It was at the Alan Turing Institute. This is definitely what it was at the time. It's okay, I can say this. We had SharePoint. We had the very bulky and painful SharePoint system. We had with that Microsoft Teams and all the usual bits and bobs that come with the Microsoft suite. And then on the side, because researchers are researchers, and this was back then a great tool for data scientists, we had Slack. IT had no oversight of how Slack was being used. So, there was a risk to be doing, not that this was happening at all, but you could get away with things on Slack that you couldn't get away with on Microsoft Teams, right?
Yeah.
Shadow IT has always been there. Abhishek Gupta, who passed away, rest his soul, he used to run the Montreal AI Ethics Institute, now run by Renji Butalib. Abhishek spoke of shadow AI, which I think I challenge the need for a new term, but I think it does help. And it's the idea that employees can use whatever, ChatGPT, without the need for IT to actually approve it. You could use it on your phone and on 3G or 5G as opposed to on the work computer, right? And you can use ChatGPT. So as level-headed as the CEOs might be, there is still a risk that those tools that they're like, we don't need them, can be used. and can put the organization at risk. So I think, I guess that's my challenge to the CEO who doesn't want to pay me for a conversation. It's
I love that. Super direct.
it's
Yeah.
your staff could be doing this. Your organization,
And they are.
They
It's
are.
called bring your own AI to work. I mean, there's a whole term for it. People are doing this all the time.
I did not hear that. I did not know that one.
Yeah, it's like the conference track of well, the corridor conference track where everyone's talking about it. But it's like, well, which app do you? And then yeah,
which app do you
it's
use?
a very common thing. Yeah.
Did you put that contract through that? Yeah. What did it say? Okay, good.
Yes, people do. People actually copy them. I mean, it happens all the time.
There's a fundamental point, which is we can't assume that these tools that are readily available to everyone will not be used inappropriately in the workplace. That should be straightforward to understand, because shadow IT is a thing. Shadow AI, or just a new iteration of shadow IT, is already present. The second is a point that we find in the workplace, which I find fascinating, in hindsight, which is that we're constantly learning throughout our lives, and the workplace is often a source of knowledge, despite whatever the listener who currently hates their job thinks. There are things we learn in the workplace which we only learned in the workplace, and the one I always come to is that health and safety policy that tells you to bend your knees and tuck when picking up a box. Something as boring as that, as commonsensical as that. We, unless you really remember what the PE teacher told you, you learn it in the workplace, or the workplace allows you to reinforce it. Now, the workplace is doing it because if you get hurt at work, they're sued, and that's costly, whatever. So you are taught things in the workplace. We're also taught, I think this is more relevant and that's the distinction I pointed to before, for the current workforce and future generations. The current workforce, we learned in the workplace also not to use public Wi-Fi for like work stuff or personal things, right? We're learning that at the workplace through organizational policies. The workplace serves as I want to say vaccine, it might be another term.
An inoculation, perhaps?
An inoculation, thank you. The workplace serves as an inoculation for the poor practices that we would otherwise conduct. And in this case, we can do bad things on AI. I could use AI and say, I'm feeling so-and-so, I'm feeling ill, I'm feeling these symptoms, whatever, and I'm giving up my private health data to AI, right? I could give it my age, I could give it my weight, my height, I could give it everything. I could say, here's every single letter I've ever had from my doctors. Tell me what I have, right? And actually, that might be a fun exercise. Do not do it. If you are listening to, I am not liable. If anyone listening to this does this, don't blame me.
Terrible idea.
But people are putting in private information or confidential business information. Put in the contract just to check, because you don't feel like lawyering on the day, right? That is a real risk that organizations are being subjected to, and the assumption on the part of certain leaders and certain staff that their colleagues won't do this is as valuable as we don't need a policy on how to pick up boxes for when they move office, right? We have those policies. Let's have the new policies that help our staff use AI in a way that helps them do their job, but also protects the reputation and the role that the organization is playing in the world.
Yeah. There is so much more that I want to cover with you. Maybe we have to do a part 2 at some point if you can bear it.
Yes.
And I think we'll do the deep questions around another time, because I just want to. Let's close 2 questions. One of them, and I think you've already highlighted some really, really key elements that people in leadership positions in businesses should be considering if they're thinking about the long-term success of their organizations, of their role, the integrity of the business, the security of the data, the performance of their employees. We've touched on a lot of things. So I'd like to end with 2 questions. The first is to give you the opportunity just to do a shout out, because I think so many more people need to have these kinds of high quality, thoughtful, well-informed conversations to figure out, okay, what's our situation? Where are we? Where do we have any blind spots, and what do we do next? And then finally, also, where can people find you? So if people want to find out more about how to work with you, how do you work, and where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. So people can definitely find me on LinkedIn. Hopefully my full name is somewhere at the bottom of this podcast.
It will. And in the title.
There you go. And in the title. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Blue Sky these days. I'm not on Twitter so much, unsurprisingly. On Blue Sky, I'm there as hermeneuticist. I couldn't find a harder word to spell. So I'm hermeneuticist on Blue Sky, where things are sometimes a bit more personal and a bit more fun. You'll find there images of drift ice, which I'd never seen or heard of before. Anyway, exciting times. And ultimately, the conversations that I have with clients, and those are staff at every level of an organization, boils down to what I call the 4 pillars of AI. So my company, Kairoi, we work on Kairoi's AI ethics canvas and the 4 pillars of AI, of responsible AI, which are very practical, basically categories of activities that organizations can conduct to do AI a bit more thoughtfully. So that's better communications, as opposed to putting images of blue brains on your blog post about AI. Why don't you put something a bit more relevant and accurate about AI? Why don't you play a role in informing the public about AI? Relevant technical standards, whatever industry you're in, there are standards out there. Having the conversation to find the relevant ones that can be implemented is important. The third one is meaningful public engagement. This is a new iteration of good old marketing focus groups, but we're now saying, right, AI actually needs to hear the voices of different people. I mentioned earlier on, it's that civil society and charities, and so on. Who is the organization engaging with, and how are they engaging with the public meaningfully? And then the fourth is robust governance. So what's your legal team look like? How well informed are they about AI and the laws surrounding it? And sometimes it's laws that don't have to do with AI. GDPR is still relevant, but people forget that. But also, how is the organization gathering its knowledge about AI? Because ultimately, I want my clients to feel knowledgeable enough about AI to shape governance and policies outside in the governmental sphere. So those consultations that governments put out on intellectual property, on the arts and AI, on the future of AI regulation, there is a role, I deeply believe, there is a role for organizations all over the place, and especially my clients, who are the best at AI ethics, to respond to those. They have a lot of knowledge. Share it with government, share it with your policymakers, and shape better conversations about AI in the future.
Brilliant. Well, that's been elucidating and inspiring and practical and fun. I wish I had another 2 hours, but thank you so much. That was such a joy. I really enjoyed it.
Good. It was such a pleasure, and you run this so wonderfully. Thank you. Thank you.